Let's be honest, most men never realize the moment they've already won. They think victory looks loud, obvious, dramatic. They think it sounds like constant texting, public affection, or her saying the words outright. But the truth is quieter, heavier, and far more unsettling. If she makes certain changes, subtle shifts in how she moves, reacts, and chooses you, the game has already turned in your favor. And if you don't recognize them in time, you can lose what you already earned without ever knowing why. Here's the first truth you were never supposed to hear. A woman doesn't change for a man she's unsure about. She adapts for the man she feels something real around. When her tone softens instead of testing you, when her arguments become discussions instead of battles, when she stops trying to win every emotional exchange, it's not weakness, it's safety. She's no longer trying to protect herself from you. She's protecting the connection with you. Watch what happens when she stops trying to impress you and starts trying to understand you. That moment is everything. The jokes become fewer but deeper. The flirting becomes less performative and more personal. She begins listening not to respond, but to absorb. That shift doesn't happen when attraction is fragile. It happens when attraction has settled into something heavier, something that doesn't need constant proof. Another change most men misread is when she pulls back slightly, not emotionally, but energetically. She stops chasing reassurance. She no longer needs to check where she stands every day. This isn't disinterest. This is confidence in her place with you. A woman who feels uncertain leans forward. A woman who feels secure leans back and lets things breathe. If you panic here, if you suddenly over-pursue, you disrupt the balance she trusted you to hold. Pay attention when she starts adjusting her boundaries without announcing it. She becomes more flexible with her time. She integrates you into her routine instead of fitting you in. You're no longer an event. You're a constant. This isn't accidental. This is her mind reorganizing around your presence. And once that happens, you're no longer competing with other men. You're competing with her peace, and you're winning. There's also a change in how she handles conflict. When she stops threatening distance and starts seeking resolution, you've crossed a psychological line most men never reach. She's no longer asking, "Should I stay?" She's asking, "How do we fix this?" That question alone should tell you everything. But here's the danger. Winning doesn't mean relaxing into complacency. These changes are signals, not finish lines. They're invitations for you to become the man who can hold what you've been given. If you let your ego spike, if you test her loyalty, if you pull away to feel powerful, you reverse the very process that brought her closer. The men who lose at this stage don't lose because she stopped caring. They lose because they stopped leading themselves. If you can recognize these changes without panicking, without posturing, without trying to dominate the moment, you step into a position very few men ever experience. Quiet respect, emotional gravity, real leverage, and once you understand this, you'll never look at her behavior the same way again. This awareness is power, and power demands restraint, patience, humility, consistency, presence, strength, clarity, discipline, and calm. One of the deepest changes a woman makes when she's emotionally invested is invisible to most men because it happens internally before it ever shows externally. Her priorities quietly rearrange themselves, not because she's forcing it, not because she's trying to trap you, but because her mind has already placed you in a category that very few ever reach. When that happens, her behavior stops being reactive and starts being intentional. You'll notice she becomes more selective with her emotional energy. She no longer vents to everyone. She doesn't broadcast her problems for attention. Instead, she brings them to you, not dramatically, not desperately, but deliberately. That's not convenience. That's trust. She's decided your perspective matters. She's chosen your voice as a reference point in her internal decision-making. Most men never realize how rare that is. Another shift is how she responds to your silence. Earlier, silence may have triggered anxiety, testing, or emotional spikes. But now, silence doesn't feel like abandonment to her. It feels like space. She assumes continuity instead of collapse. That assumption is a psychological milestone. It means she no longer fears losing you at every pause. She believes the connection exists, even when nothing is happening. That belief only forms when her attraction has stabilized. Watch how she talks about the future without making it a negotiation. She doesn't ask where this is going every week. She references moments ahead casually, naturally, as if they're already part of the timeline. That's not pressure. That's expectation, and expectation is born from certainty, not hope. A woman who hopes asks questions. A woman who's certain makes statements. There's also a noticeable change in how she handles male attention around her. She doesn't weaponize it. She doesn't mention who's texting her to provoke a reaction. She doesn't need to create jealousy to feel chosen. Her need to prove her value decreases because she already feels valued in your presence. Men often misinterpret this as boredom or fading attraction. In reality, it's emotional security replacing performative desire. Another sign most men mishandle is when she starts seeing you clearly, flaws included, and doesn't flinch. Early attraction is built on fantasy. Real attachment is built on reality. When she no longer idealizes you, but still chooses you, you've crossed into something powerful. This is where many men self-sabotage by trying to regain mystery instead of deepening stability. They confuse unpredictability with attraction and end up eroding trust. Pay attention when she starts mirroring your emotional pace. She doesn't rush intimacy, but she doesn't avoid it either. She aligns. That alignment means she's emotionally calibrating to you, not trying to control you. It's subtle, but it's profound. It shows she's no longer leading with fear or impulse. She's leading with connection. Here's the uncomfortable truth. At this stage, your behavior matters more than ever, not because she's fragile, but because she's open. When a woman opens emotionally, she becomes observant. She watches consistency. She notices small contradictions. She feels shifts in tone before words change. If you grow careless here, if you let entitlement replace effort, she won't argue. She'll detach quietly. Winning her doesn't look like conquest. It looks like stewardship. It looks like emotional discipline. The men who keep what they've earned are the ones who understand that attraction deepens when safety, respect, and leadership coexist. If you can hold that balance without needing validation, without chasing control, you step into a level of masculine presence that doesn't need to announce itself. And that presence is exactly what keeps her choosing you long after the chase is over. There comes a point where her behavior stops being driven by emotion alone and starts being guided by instinct. This is where most men get confused, because instinct doesn't look romantic. It looks calm. It looks grounded. It looks almost ordinary. But psychologically, this is where you gain the most influence without ever asking for it. You'll notice she becomes more honest, not just kind honesty, but inconvenient honesty. She tells you things she could easily keep to herself, thoughts that might risk friction, feelings that don't guarantee approval. A woman does not do this when she's trying to impress you. She does this when she believes the connection can withstand truth. This is not rebellion, this is trust and structure. Another quiet shift is how she reacts when you disagree with her. Earlier, disagreement may have felt like rejection to her. Now it doesn't threaten the bond. She doesn't escalate. She doesn't withdraw dramatically. She listens. She may challenge you, but she stays present. That presence tells you something critical. She no longer feels like she has to win every exchange to secure her value. She already feels chosen. Watch closely when she starts regulating herself around you. She doesn't explode emotionally the way she used to, not because she's suppressing herself, but because your presence stabilizes her nervous system. This is biology, not romance. Her body associates you with safety, and when a woman feels safe, she becomes cooperative, open, and deeply bonded. Most men try to force this with control. The men who succeed create it with consistency. There's also a change in how she speaks about you when you're not around. You may not hear it directly, but you'll sense it. Friends treat you differently. Her circle acknowledges you without skepticism. That only happens when her internal narrative about you has solidified. She's no longer selling you to herself or others. She's already decided who you are in her world. One of the most overlooked signals is when she stops keeping score. She no longer tallies who texted first, who planned last, who gave more. Scorekeeping is a symptom of uncertainty. When it disappears, it means she's no longer measuring effort to protect herself. She trusts the flow. That trust didn't come from words. It came from your behavior over time. This is also where her attraction becomes quieter but deeper. Less fireworks, more gravity, less urgency, more attachment. Men who mistake intensity for love often ruin this phase by reintroducing chaos. They go distant to feel powerful. They provoke jealousy to feel desired. What they don't realize is that chaos doesn't increase attraction here. It fractures it. When she starts allowing you to see her in unguarded moments, tired, unsure, unpolished, that's not comfort turning into boredom. That's intimacy replacing performance. And intimacy is what keeps a woman bonded long-term. She no longer feels like she has to audition for your attention. She feels like she belongs in your presence. But understand this clearly. At this stage, she's watching how you handle responsibility. Not just emotional responsibility, but self-responsibility. Your discipline, your boundaries, your direction in life. She doesn't need you to be perfect. She needs you to be grounded. A man who loses himself after winning her teaches her that safety was an illusion. The men who hold her here don't tighten their grip. They steady their hands. They lead without pressure. They remain consistent without becoming predictable. They stay present without becoming needy. If you can do that, if you can remain centered while she leans in emotionally, you'll experience something rare. A woman who chooses you not out of fear, excitement, or uncertainty, but out of clarity. And clarity is the strongest form of desire there is. There's a moment when her attachment stops asking questions and starts making adjustments. This is where her behavior becomes almost strategic, not in a manipulative way, but in a deeply feminine, adaptive way. She begins shaping her world with you already accounted for in it, and most men are completely unaware this is happening while it's happening. You'll notice she becomes more protective of the connection, not possessive, not controlling, but intentional. She avoids unnecessary drama. She removes herself from situations that could threaten the bond, not because you demanded it, because she values what she feels with you more than fleeting attention. This is a woman who has decided that peace with you is more rewarding than validation from others. Another change is how she reacts to your strength. Earlier, your confidence may have challenged her, even triggered tests. Now, she leans into it. She respects it. She trusts your decisions more often, even when she doesn't fully understand them yet. This doesn't mean she loses her voice. It means she recognizes your stability and allows it to lead. That permission is not given lightly. It's earned through repeated emotional reliability. Watch how she handles vulnerability around you. She doesn't dramatize it. She doesn't weaponize her pain. She shares it plainly, calmly, almost quietly. That's because she believes you won't misuse it. A woman only reveals her softer layers when she trusts a man's restraint. If she thought you would exploit her openness, she would armor up instantly. There's also a shift in how she views your flaws. Instead of collecting them as evidence against you, she contextualizes them. She understands where they come from. She distinguishes between patterns and moments. This is massive. It means she's no longer scanning for reasons to leave. She's looking for reasons to stay and grow. Men often destroy this by becoming defensive instead of accountable. Another overlooked sign is when she stops trying to change you. Early on, suggestions feel like corrections. At this stage, they feel like collaboration. She doesn't want to mold you into something else. She wants to build alongside who you already are. That only happens when she respects your core identity. Without respect, attraction erodes. With it, attachment deepens. Pay attention to how she responds when you're under pressure. She doesn't add to it. She supports without smothering. She trusts your ability to handle challenges. That trust isn't blind. It's based on evidence. She's seen how you regulate yourself, how you recover, how you don't collapse under stress. For many women, this is more attractive than charm or status. This is also where her emotional reactions become more proportionate. Small issues stay small. Misunderstandings don't escalate into ultimatums. That doesn't mean she cares less. It means she feels safer. Her nervous system isn't constantly scanning for threat. And when a woman feels safe, her attachment becomes steady instead of volatile. Here's where many men fail. They mistake her calm for complacency. They think the lack of drama means the loss of desire. So they reintroduce uncertainty. They go cold. They test boundaries. They chase the emotional spikes of earlier stages. And in doing so, they teach her that the safety she felt was temporary. Winning here means doing something counterintuitive. You stay grounded. You don't perform. You don't provoke. You don't pull away to feel powerful. You hold your frame quietly and consistently. And that consistency becomes the anchor her emotions organize around. At this point, you're no longer just attractive, you're significant. And significance is what makes a woman stay when novelty fades. If you can understand that, truly understand it, you'll realize that what you're building now isn't excitement, it's permanence. By now, her mindset has shifted in ways most men never notice because it's subtle, almost imperceptible. She's no longer chasing validation. She's no longer performing to test your worth. Her energy is concentrated, directed toward maintaining a connection that feels safe, exciting, and emotionally fulfilling all at once. And if you pay attention, you'll see the signs, but you have to be awake to them. The first change is how she communicates desire. It's no longer constant or frantic. She doesn't send endless texts to check if you care. She doesn't craft moments to get attention. Instead, she communicates with precision. Every word, every glance, every gesture is deliberate. That's not indifference, it's clarity. She's learned that attention without intention is meaningless, and she's aligning herself with what feels real. Another profound shift is her patience. She waits differently now, not out of manipulation, not as a test, but because she trusts the rhythm of the relationship. She doesn't need to force moments or chase answers. She allows them to unfold naturally because she believes you're present, and she's secure in her place. Most men misinterpret this as losing interest, but it's the exact opposite. It's deepening attachment. Watch closely when she begins defending your reputation in private and public without being asked. Friends notice subtle statements. She reframes conversations. She protects your image quietly. That action alone reveals more than 1,000 compliments ever could. A woman who invests energy defending you has already decided that your presence in her life is valuable and non-negotiable. Another indicator is how she balances independence with intimacy. She no longer overcompensates to seem desirable. She no longer disappears to make you chase. Instead, she moves fluidly between her life and yours. She integrates without losing herself. That balance is rare. Most men never get this because they confuse dependency for attraction. The truth is, autonomy paired with emotional alignment creates irresistible connection. You'll notice a change in her body language too. Small shifts in proximity, in eye contact, in how she mirrors your movements, all of it signals comfort and trust. She doesn't need to compete for your attention with gestures or posturing. She's present with you fully, authentically, because she's already decided you belong there. Another signal that gets overlooked is how she navigates challenges. She doesn't dramatize setbacks. She seeks solutions. She includes you without demanding direction. She aligns, she supports, she co-creates. That approach doesn't happen by accident. It happens when her mind categorizes you as a partner, not a variable. Most men panic at this stage, thinking security will dull desire, but security, when paired with attraction, amplifies it. Perhaps the most subtle yet powerful shift is how she values your opinion, not as a test, not as control, but as a guide. She's open to influence without compromising her core self. She consults you naturally because she trusts your judgment. That is a rare form of psychological intimacy, far more meaningful than words of affection or declarations of love. But here's the danger. When a man recognizes these signs, he often relaxes too early. He assumes victory, forgets to lead, and mistakes comfort for entitlement. That's when things unravel. Attraction doesn't disappear, but respect can. Security doesn't mean stagnation. It requires presence, consistency, and discipline to maintain. This is the stage where a man moves from being desired to being indispensable. You are no longer just an option or a challenge. You are the center of her emotional universe. And when you understand that, you begin to see the subtle art of winning, quiet influence, unwavering presence, and mastery over your own emotional state. By recognizing these changes, you're no longer chasing. You're holding, guiding, and commanding without pressure. And that is the essence of true masculine power in female psychology. This is where most men completely misunderstand what winning really looks like. They think winning her heart ends with the chase, the first kiss, the first "I love you." But real victory isn't about crossing a finish line. It's about holding the ground she's already given you and understanding the silent language she now speaks. If you've noticed the shifts, the trust, the patience, the subtle alignment, you're standing in the territory most men never reach, and few ever recognize it until it's gone. The first sign you've truly won is how she prioritizes you without being asked. She naturally adjusts her schedule to include you, not because she's obliged, but because she wants to. You're no longer an interruption in her life. You're a natural part of her world. She no longer feels the need to justify her attention to you because she's already committed internally. Most men mistake this for complacency, when in fact it's the quiet declaration of attachment and respect. You'll see another shift in how she handles conflict. She stops creating drama and begins creating solutions. She doesn't argue to prove a point. She communicates to understand. She no longer frames disagreements as tests of your value. Instead, she works with you to preserve connection. That psychological shift is huge. Women don't naturally do this until they feel secure. And once she does, it's a sign she's chosen to anchor herself with you emotionally and mentally. Then comes the subtle change in desire. She doesn't need to prove she wants you through constant attention or games. Her attraction is quieter but far more intense. The touches linger, the glances last longer, the voice softens in your presence. Desire isn't about chasing anymore. It's about returning. She gives it freely because she's emotionally invested, and that level of commitment can't be bought or manipulated. Most men fail here because they keep chasing intensity instead of honoring the calm gravity she now embodies. Another indicator is how she talks about you to others. Friends, family, colleagues. She naturally frames you as someone important. She speaks in a way that elevates your presence without being forced or performative. That's not showing off. That's subconscious loyalty. A woman who does this has already internalized your value and chosen to align herself with it. That alignment is far stronger than any verbal declaration of love. Finally, she begins mirroring your emotional pace, your moods, your energy, your stability. They guide her reactions. She doesn't need constant reassurance or validation. She adjusts, she responds, she compliments you. This is a rare form of psychological bonding, and it signals that she's no longer measuring her worth against yours. She's comfortable enough to let you lead without fear, knowing the connection is secure. But here's the critical point most men miss. These changes aren't a green light to stop showing value. They are signals that your behavior now defines the emotional ecosystem she's created around you. Complacency, inconsistency, or emotional volatility can undo years of subtle progress in moments. The men who hold this stage don't overplay it. They remain steady, present, disciplined, and emotionally mature. That presence amplifies attraction instead of diminishing it. If you've recognized these changes in your woman, here's your personal equation. How can you amplify security, consistency, and emotional gravity while maintaining attraction and growth? Write your answer in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and share this with a friend who needs to hear this, because understanding these changes is the difference between losing her and holding her forever.